Today, as a freelance designer, there are a variety of ways you can work. You can be a solo freelancer, managing your own clients, or you can be freelance through design recruitment agencies and work on location. Now, these are two very different ways of working as a freelance designer. However, being a freelancer, you have the freedom and flexibility to undertake either of these options, or even both. So if you're interested in becoming freelance and want to know more about design recruitment agency freelance, then check out this video. So what's the difference between design recruitment agency freelance and solo freelance? Now, design recruitment agency is a bit of a mouthful. So for the rest of this video, I'm going to be referring to design recruitment agency as DRA. So the first and probably the most significant difference between DRA freelance and solo freelance is finding work. Now, as a freelancer, no matter what type, you will always be looking for work, but the way you find work can change by which type of freelance you undertake. With DRA freelance, design recruitment agencies will typically chase the clients to get them on their books, and then they will use the roster of freelancers on their books to do the work. If a freelancer is registered with a DRA, then at some point they will get a call directly from the agent with a proposition for a contract. So in this instance, instead of having to look for work, the work finds you. So the next big difference between DRA freelance and solo freelance is where you work. Now, another big difference is that with DRA freelance, a freelancer will 95% of the time be required to work on location at the office or studio that commissioned the contract. Clients will always prefer a freelancer to work at their location, to work closely with the client, take direction, work within the parameters of the company, the team, and the brief to carry out the creative task until it's complete and the contract is over. So the next difference between DRA freelance and solo freelance is working a day rate. Now, this is a big one. A DRA freelancer will typically be working a day rate. Before taking on a contract, a freelancer will agree to a day rate, and that is what they will get, whatever happens. It is then up to the client to utilize and manage a freelancer's time. So every day a freelancer works, they will get paid even if they don't do any work. Now, another thing to bear in mind is that as well as a freelancer's day rate, the creative recruiter will be earning commission. Whatever the day rate, the client will actually be paying more, and it's that difference which an agent will earn. So another difference between DRA freelance and solo freelance is having to take direction from a creative director, art director, or senior personnel. As a freelancer working on location, they will be required to work with the client within the parameters of the company, the team, and the brief to carry out the creative task until it's complete and the contract is over. This requires the freelancer to work within the current structure of the company and take direction from senior members of the creative team. Now, depending on the freelancer's experience and the role the freelancer is expected to undertake, this can vary. Unlike solo freelance, where you may have a lot of freedom on your own projects, if a freelancer works at a design studio, it's common that someone will be leading a particular project, and the freelancer will have to work to someone else's direction. Now, I have experienced both. Earlier in my career, when I was more junior to middleweight, often I would join a team and take direction from senior creative members. However, in recent years, having become more senior, I have now started to lead my own projects. These days, I tend to have more freedom and control over my own design. So another difference between DRA freelance and solo freelance is working time. Now, this is another big one. A DRA freelancer will work between the working hours of the studio they are working with. When the day is done, they are done. Now, unlike what can happen when you work as a solo freelancer, where a client will not pay until they are satisfied, they may request updates or tweaks that could go on over the agreed time limit. Now, there may be times a DRA freelancer will be required to work overtime to get the job done, but in that scenario, a freelancer can claim that as overtime, so they can still get paid. In my experience, typically a client will extend a contract for a few more days or weeks if there is more work to be done. So in this instance, you get paid for exactly the time you work. So the next big difference between DRA freelance and solo freelance is getting paid. So as a DRA freelancer, getting paid is also slightly different. Unlike solo freelance, where you will submit an invoice to your client direct, here a DRA freelancer is required to submit a timesheet and invoice directly to the DRA. So in this instance, a freelancer will not have to chase the client directly for payment. It will be up to the DRA to process an invoice. Which brings me on to the next difference: speed at which a freelancer is paid. Now, in this instance, it's up to the DRA to manage and worry about the payment from the client. Now, depending on the terms and conditions of the DRA, the invoice for the DRA freelancer can be paid as soon as within a week or otherwise fortnightly or monthly. In my experience, I have mostly been paid every week and fortnightly, though on rare occasions it's been up to a month. So the next difference between DRA freelance and solo freelance is contracts. Now, a DRA freelancer will not have to enter into any formal contract with the client. This means a freelancer will not be liable for anything other than to carry out the project to a satisfactory standard. So in this instance, working as a DRA freelancer is fairly risk-free. Now, if anything bad should happen, for example, the freelancer fails to meet the standards expected or fails to finish the work within a time frame, it won't be something the freelancer will have to deal with. This will typically fall back on the DRA to handle. But if this does happen, it could spoil the reputation and working relationship between DRA and freelancer. Now, on occasions, a freelancer will have to sign a NDA with the client, which is a promise not to disclose any private information, share business secrets, or let anyone know of a secret project they may be working on. Now, I believe if you were to break that contract, you would be liable. So the next difference between DRA freelance and solo freelance is no pitching. As a solo freelancer, there are a variety of ways one may get work, through word of mouth, pitching, or showcasing their portfolio. With DRA freelance, this is typically only done through a portfolio. With DRA freelance, you generally don't have to pitch for work, and you generally don't get a chance to chat with the client beforehand. If an agent representing a freelancer puts them across to a client, this will be in the form of a portfolio and CV. Right now, it's very common to submit a PDF portfolio or a website which is easily shared through email and kept on the DRA's database. In this instance, a client is looking at what you can do for them, so we'll be looking at what you have done in the past to prove what you can potentially do for them on a job. This is a much simpler approach compared to solo freelance, though you will need to put lots of work into your portfolio to make it look as good as possible, as there will be stiff competition. So the next difference between DRA freelance and solo freelance is minimal administration. Now, a DRA will be responsible for all administration for a contract. A DRA freelancer won't be required to get involved in any administration. This leaves the freelancer focused primarily on the creative task and do a good job. The only administration required by the freelancer is to fill out a timesheet once a week and send an invoice to the DRA to process. So the last difference between DRA freelance and solo freelance is no pressure to maintain clients. As a solo freelancer, there is typically a desire to keep clients, as this will keep the revenue coming in and to generate potential work in future. Now, this is not typically the case with a DRA freelancer. During the course of a year, a DRA freelancer may undertake several contracts with several different studios. As mentioned earlier, work typically comes to the DRA freelancer. So once a DRA freelancer is available, it won't be long before their agent is calling to offer them new opportunities. So this diminishes the anxiety that can be felt with the solo freelancer to maintain clients. So to recap, the big differences between DRA freelance and solo freelance are finding work, where you work, working a day rate, having to take direction from senior personnel, working time, getting paid, speed at which you are paid, contracts, no pitching, minimal administration, and no pressure to maintain clients. So that's some of the differences between working DRA freelance and working solo freelance. So if you have any questions regarding design agency freelance, be sure to pop them in the comment section below and I'll be sure to get back to you. Now, at this point, if you're interested in DRA freelance, you might be wondering if it's right for you. So over the next 2 videos, I'm going to be discussing the pros and cons to DRA freelance. So in the next video, I'm going to be discussing 10 positives to DRA freelance. So see you in the next video.